It's indeed a pleasure to have all participants joining us from diverse programs and also from different professional background for this insightful session today with the topic crisis communication and brand management. So this topic is especially timely because in today's fast-paced digital world, where information tends to spread rapidly, a single event, if not properly managed, can significantly influence how brands tend to perceive us. So we are honored today to have our distinguished speaker with us, Miss Oluwa Rotimi, who will be sharing her valuable insights today with us. And also we have with us our moderator, Samuel Odubi, for guiding our session today. So he will be guiding the flow of our session today. So before I hand over to our moderator, Mr. Samuel, I will also like to state few guidelines. So before we start, I would like us to ensure that our microphones are muted throughout the session. So, and also I would like you to ensure that you keep a professional background, as this webinar will be recorded. And also feel free to share your thoughts, share your questions in the chat box. And please do not mark your attendance in the chat box. So the chat box is just for you to ask your questions and also to share your thoughts. All right. And also only the participants of this workshop will have access to our slides and also our recordings as well. And before the end of the session, I will send the attendance survey in the chat box. So please ensure you fill the attendance survey. And lastly, before the end of the session, we will be taking a group photograph. So we will notify you when it is time to turn on your camera. I will also encourage you to maintain a professional appearance for that screenshot. So thank you once again for joining us today. I hope you have a productive and engaging session today. Thank you. Mr. Samuel, please, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Esther. Please, can we confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Samuel.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RBSN Business Leadership Development Program. Today, we're going to be focusing on crisis communication and branch reputation management. I'm Samuel Odubi, and I'm delighted to moderate today's session. Now, we're privileged to have our distinguished speaker, Ms. Oluwarantimi with us today. And let me share a bit about her background. Olarantim is an African-focused influence and impact advisor whose work sits at the intersection of systems, actions, and voices that shape development outcomes. She is a partner, corporate sustainability and stakeholder engagement at the Influence Agency, which she co-founded to champion influence for good in support of Africa's development priorities. Ronti works with organizations across the private sector, civil society, and public institutions. Her work centers on helping organizations navigate complex stakeholder environments, strengthen influence and reputation, and deliver communications that align comments, policy, partnerships, stakeholder behavior, and institutional actions to deliver meaningful and measurable impact. A strong advocate of sustainability-led development, Ronti believes Africa's progress will be driven by systems thinking, locally grounded insights, and collaboration across sectors. Her work focuses on stakeholder and public affairs engagement in areas such as education quality, financial inclusion, maternal health and waste management, as well as crisis leadership and reputation stewardship in complex environments. She also supports organizations to mobilize trusted voices and partnerships that strengthen legitimacy, accountability, and long-term value. Her advisory spans such sectors as food and beverage, financial services, venture capital and startups, civil society, and public service. Prior to co-founding the Influence Agency, Ronti built a strong agency career, serving with Africa Practice before joining Quadrant MSL, where she rose to head of business and chief operating officer. In this role, she led agency operations, client advisory, and the design of influence-led programs that integrated corporate strategy with social and development outcomes. Beyond her advisory work, Ronti serves as Director of Partnerships at Orisun Collective Incorporated, a US-based nonprofit advancing creativity and design thinking among Nigerian youths aged 14 to 19. She holds an MSc in Corporate Communications and Reputation Management from Alliance Manchester Business School and is a member of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, SPIN, and the member of Institute of Public Relations, NIPR. Now, with a virtual handshake, clap of hands and thumb up, let's please welcome Ms. Oluwarantimi. Ms. Oluwarantimi, we are eager to hear your insight on giving and receiving constructive feedback. Please, you can take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel. It's good to speak with you and it's good to engage with everyone here on the call. When I asked about this session, I was told there was going to be like 50 to 100 people, but I'm seeing 400 people and I'm like, hey, but it's great to be here and I'd love to share the insights with everyone. That was a very, very long, but I'm simply Ronti and let's get to it. So I will go ahead to share with you thoughts on, just let me know that you can see me, you can hear me clearly, you can see my screen, and we're set to go.
Yes, I can see and hear you. And yes, your screen is open.
Okay, that's awesome. Like Samuel said, I am partner at the Influence Agency, where we work with organizations on strategic communications and influence management and influencer marketing. And that's because we find that work in Africa, work in the world is really driven by people. And if you understand people, you can understand how to deal with them and how to engage them and how to drive outcomes that lead to development for all of us. So I'm going straight into it. Crisis communications and reputation management. What is it? Or in a sense, what is it really about? And I'm sure that a number of people here already sort of understand that. We understand that a crisis is an issue, is a problem that needs resolving right now. We understand that reputation management is important, especially for brands and organizations, and increasingly now for people, because it's no longer just about the organizations that we lead or the brands that we develop. It's about the people behind them, and increasingly people are becoming the businesses that we're selling. And so what we will be talking about is just the elements that contribute to effective crisis communications and reputation management. A crisis is technically a problem of unmet expectations. And what does that really mean? It's that someone has an expectation of something, it wasn't met, it has become a problem or an issue, and it has escalated. And so if we're able to dumb it down to that granular thought, then we know where we know what it is that we need to solve. So if it's a problem of unmet expectation, then we need to be dealing with expectations and understanding them. So if for example, there's a crisis around a product defects, it's that the expectation around product safety has not been met. If it's about data breaches and cyber attacks, it's that the expectation about data privacy and safety have not been met. So crisis is really a problem of unmet expectations. Once we bridge the gap between the expectation and the action, we would most likely not have a crisis. But that doesn't mean also that the crisis will not develop, because we have external factors that we have to deal with. So a crisis is bound to occur. In researching, sometime in 2020, 2019, business leaders from a survey by PwC had said, well, at least 95% of business leaders had said they expected to experience a crisis sometime in the future. Of the survey, of those surveyed, about 69% had said that they had experienced some form of crisis 5 years before. So between 2014 and 2019, 69% of them had experienced crisis. But that was 2019. Between 2019 and now, we've gone through COVID, the pandemic. We have wars. It's wars, Russia, Ukraine, the US, Iran, Israel. It's insurgency, which seems to be skyrocketing. Bubbles and bursts, whether it's a financial meltdown, which lots of analysts are saying that we should expect in the near future, or some cyber attack or some cyber terrorism. And so if we have gone through all of this and we're here now in 2026, May 13th, it seems more that we are in a perma-crisis of sorts. So it's no longer that we're expecting a crisis. It's now that, hey, some way or the other, you would have to deal with the crisis. You're thinking, okay, what does the Russia-Ukraine war have to deal with my brand or with me? If you're in the FMCG, you're thinking about supply chains and products and sourcing and imports and all of that. For the for the US, Israel, Iran crisis as well, or the war, again, it's about supply chain and routes and markets and expansion. If you're in thinking global or not, or even if your market is just local and all you're doing is selling oil and energy to Nigerians in Nigeria, there's still effects of that. And so some way or the other, there's something to be dealt with. The issues are significantly more, the crisis seems to be more. And so anyone, whether you're a brand manager or a communications professional or just even a business leader in whatever form, we're dealing with a perma crisis, and there is need to sort of understand what needs to be done now. So with that being said, it means that reputation management in this era is a continuous exercise of crisis management. You might not hear the crisis in the news, but some way or the other, I can imagine what, for example, the Dangote refinery would have had to deal with once the issues and the Strait of Hormuz was affected. I can imagine what, we even saw those things in the news where bakeries and bakers had to deal with the effects of the Russian-Ukraine war on their prices. And with pricing, it leads to effects on brands. And so, like I said, it's that constant and continuous exercise of crisis management and reputation management. And so anyone in this era, again, especially for communications experts, professionals, you're constantly predicting, you're preparing, you're either responding to something or recovering, and it's always in that flux some way or the other. So what really then is prediction? Thinking about this as the framework for engaging and establishing a strong reputation, or ensuring that right here, right now, we're able to deal with the crisis of the world we're in. Whether you're locally here or you are dealing with the issues of global global contentions and tensions, or you're dealing with something from Borneo, again, thinking about agri produce that needs to travel from the north to the south, and how all of the insecurity and the effects of that have, and the impacts they have on the brand. So prediction. It's really about reputational capital. We understand that crisis management and communication start the moment a service or product is offered, before a crisis ever emerges. What that means is whether it's abiding or adhering to laws and policies, you're building reputational capital. Whether it's your operations and the optimization of your operations and processes, again, it's reputational capital. How do those things relate to the service quality, the products that you're delivering, the brand promise? What are the claims you're making in advertising? What are the claims you're fulfilling through your products as they're made in advertising? And what's the social capital that you're building for your brand or for yourself or for the organization that you're that you work with, through your social impact initiatives, engaging the communities? All of these feed into crisis management and communications. So the work of the crisis manager, or the work of the reputation manager, or communications expert, doesn't start when there is a crisis. It starts right from the moment a product or service is delivered. And for the small business person, it's the same thoughts that apply. Once you deliver a product, the sense of crisis management or reputation management should already be established, because a defect in a product that leads to a health issue or leads to some bigger problem comes back to the first point of it being delivered, comes back to that point of delivery and service, and the first moment the product was even conceived. So it's really about reputational capital. A company or a brand that can establish strong reputational capital will be able to deal with crisis when it eventually occurs. And the impact of that, the volume, in a sense, of the reputational capital can determine the success of the crisis management effort when a crisis eventually occurs. So reputational capital is important. The work of crisis management, reputation management, doesn't start when the crisis happens. It starts right when the first product is delivered. And once we understand that, then we're able to take the necessary steps to managing and delivering a strong reputation for ourselves, for our individuals, for our brands, and for the organizations that we work with. So what then do we need to do? The first is that we understand where we play. And a lot of time I speak to communications professionals, sometimes people that call themselves PR experts, and I'm asking questions like, okay, so what are the trends happening with the people that work with me or work with us? What's the trend? What are you noticing? What are the things that are happening within the business, with the brands that you're managing, beyond just the fluff and the surface? Because brand management for products has the side of it where it's exciting, but when you can bring together the understanding of the business to the brands, understanding of the operating environment, then you are more successful, and you're able to quickly and intuitively adapt to the issues that come up. Because marketing, apart from corporate communications, marketing is about understanding markets. So there's the excitement, there's the engagement, there are the events, there are all the other activities that go on, but there are also all the other underlying issues that impact the brand. So whether it's a beverage brand or a personal and home care brand, whether it's a financial services sector brand, again, all of the issues contribute. If, for example, you find with a dairy brand who sources milk from somewhere in the north and they're having issues there, then you understand that the impact on delivery of that brand to the market, the impact of the delivery of the promise is affected because all these other underlying issues have undergone. All these underlying issues have taken effect. So you need to think about the value chain. Who are the stakeholders? What are the power dynamics and shifts? What are the issues? What are the competitors doing? What type of competitors are we working with? Are they people that defend, or are they offensive? Do they go in and try to destroy the competition? What's their operating environment like? What's pricing like? What are the risks? Risk management with crisis management and reputation management go hand in hand, and I think we'll talk about that as we go on. No one that manages a brand can do it without understanding risks. And I think that as with the communications experts, PR, brand, marketing, there is the need to go beyond just what it is that seems to be tied to the one brand and looking beyond to the risk, what comes together for in building a brand, what comes together for the business that is brand. In thinking about value chain, of course, we need to mind the business, like I said. The value chain concept helps with understanding all the different elements that contribute to building a brand, especially when we're thinking about product brands, but also thinking about a service. So it helps to identify what are the different areas that may what are the different areas that may contribute as risks to a crisis. And I'll explain that. So if, for example, you're looking at the inbound logistics, and I think we've talked about inbound logistics, but things around sourcing, and you find that the source of mangoes coming from Ogbomosho, for example, is affected. And we know I don't want to mention brands, but your product, for example, is dried mangoes, and the source of that is affected. We know then that it affects the quality, the taste of whatever is put in the market. Is it that things are on shelves longer? Customers or clients are dealing with moldy products or not? It's either you don't have enough to feed the promise and the market, and so consumers or customers move to another brand because yours is not available. And so when we look at the value chain, we are able to identify the areas within the business and everything that leads up to the delivery of this brand, and we're able to identify the potential areas for crisis. That's what we're saying. We're able to identify the potential areas for crisis. We're able to identify the potential risks that may occur, whether the operational risks, technological risks, and where it seems like you lack the skill, it's always great to work with a risk manager. Always great to work with somebody that understands how to identify risks and put together the thoughts that are required for that. The next bit is to know your stakeholders. We have the general stakeholder groups and stakeholder buckets. How, for example, do governments, regulators, consumers, employees, investors, suppliers, distributors contribute to this brand? What are their interests? What are their attitudes? What's the sentiment? If you're in financial services, what's the CBN saying about my brand? Not even just about the brand, but about other players within my sector. What are the tendencies for the suppliers that I work with to impact my brand or my organization or the business that I deliver. So know your stakeholders. But and when we say know your stakeholders, we're not just saying, oh, know them. Oh, yes, we have media. That's great. Oh, we work with the government. Fantastic. Really know them. And some of the things that we do in supporting organizations and supporting organizations and brands is to say, well, these are your stakeholders. You have the groups. That's fine. But there are people within those organizations. And if we understand that people's biases, objectives, interests influence their policy making, their attitudes to issues, then you really want to understand and know who it is you're dealing with. So, for example, you have the Ministry of Health, you have the minister. He has his background, he has his interests, he has the things that make him tick, the things that make him annoyed. Do you know those? And I'm speaking specifically for those that can put in the time to doing this. Of course, you can always work with experts and agencies that can deliver that, but it's about understanding who your stakeholder is. Who are the decision makers? How can they impact in the long or short term my brand? How can they impact the workings of our organization? How can they impact our reputation? Because in one evening, a shift in policy for a regulator, from a regulator, can turn everything upside down. In one day, just one conversation from somebody else who has strong influence over him can turn a policy, can turn a perspective, can turn public interest or public understanding of an issue around. So what are their motivations? What, for example, are their political leanings? Because the administration of the day influences technically the policies of the day. If they're in opposition, for example, we know how that turns out, possibly or not. So understanding and really knowing our stakeholders, and that's tracking their sentiments, tracking their attitudes, tracking their influence. But then when we do know our stakeholders and we understand the reputation, we understand the reputational impact of their decisions, how then do we engage them? This is a simple framework to work with. So you've looked at your stakeholder, you know their power over your brand, over a specific issue, you know their interests. You can definitely then determine, okay, is this somebody that we need to actually engage daily? Is this somebody that we need to keep informed? We just need to keep telling them, okay, we're doing this. This is the efforts we're putting into changing our approach to sustainability, to waste management, to water management, whatever it is. These are the efforts we're showing. These are the efforts we're taking. Is it that you don't really need to do much? You just need to watch them, monitor them, and ensure that when the time is right, you're able to engage? Or is it that you're bringing them on board as partners? Because when they're your partners, they're your advocates. And once they're advocating for you, they know that they have more of a stake in the reputation of your brand and the reputation of your organization. So we know our stakeholders, but we always constantly need to engage them because we have mapped their interests. We understand who they are, and we understand where we're going. Again, issues. Issues, unlike risks, are not congent necessarily. There's things or concepts or conversations that are brewing or simmering one way or the other. They're sometimes in the public domain and sometimes they're not. An issue can and may not be associated with your company or with a particular company or a brand. It's just something that is there underlying, something that we need to be concerned about and we need to know. It's often brewing because there has been some level of activity around that issue. It's that maybe somebody is having these conversations within the committee on something in the Senate, or some NGO is pushing for this thing, or somebody, a regulator, for example, has a personal bias towards, let's just use water, and they don't just like water. Once they drink water, it makes them sad. And so they want to stop everyone from drinking water. Issues are underlying topics, conversations going on. And that's why the work of crisis management and reputation management doesn't start when the crisis happens. You have to be monitoring, you have to understand what's happening, you have to be able to tell when an issue is escalating. And again, we'll talk about some of these things as we go. So we need to understand the life point or life circle of an issue. Where is the issue at right now? And while this might seem academic, once we understand the concept of the concept, we're able to intuitively make decisions. So we're needing to detect when an issue first emerges. An issue emerges, someone puts out a story, a feature article, somebody puts out an opinion piece in the newspaper. A lot of the time it's to trigger action. It's to get the public opinion, is to get some possibly regulator seeing and attending to the issue. So detecting when an issue emerges is very important, because then you're able to take the steps to engage. And engagement is always better when an issue emerges or when it is just in the debate session. So people are talking about it. Should we take this action or not against brands in this fair? Or should we just take this action because it is supposed to be better for everyone in the society? Is it better for us to tax on specific aspects of a product formulation, or is it better for us not to? What are the impacts on consumers and pricing and purchasing power? What's the impact or not on perception? So we need to understand and monitor issues. That's being able to detect them, and then we're able to debate and engage in the process of determining whether they become codified and enforced or not, and we can influence. That's where issues management comes in. And in engagement, it takes different forms. It's either we're defending our arguments and saying, well, we don't think that a tax on this should be implemented because, hey, for example, it's going to affect purchasing power. The ripple effects on certain people would be catastrophic. Or do we bargain and say, well, at this point, we don't think it should happen now. Why don't we keep it for another 5 years? Let's see how companies and brands within the same space can adjust and build towards that. Or are we going and saying, okay, well, it's really about education. The point is, a tax is good. And once a tax comes in, everybody benefits. Yes, no. Do we dialogue? We create a forum around it and ensure that we're able to bring in more people, more stakeholders into the conversation, and so that we reach a collective agreement about something? Or do we get advocates, somebody to say, well, we're not the ones that are going to be speaking. We would rather speak through somebody else who has more credibility, who has the opportunity, who has the voice to carry the weight of this issue as it would affect our brand, yes or no? Or do we partner, as many associations do, whether it's the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria or the Association of Food and Beverage Companies, or it's through the Financial Services Association? Again, all of that comes together, how we engage so that an issue doesn't become codified, it doesn't then escalate into a crisis. An issue that has been enforced in law does not necessarily become a crisis. And so we also need to understand how issues evolve into crisis. Every issue starts out as every crisis, starts out as an issue, whether it's an internal issue or an external conversation happening. Some way or the other, it has simmered, it has brewed, and it has gotten to its peak. And that's why monitoring and understanding what's happening is very, very important. So an issue can be latent, and nobody's really saying much about it. It's just there in the law, about a brand, or it's just conversations happening, as we're seeing, for example, with things around sustainability. And soon enough, there's going to be a law in, I think by 2028, there's a law that says everyone needs to be, certain companies have to be reporting. Brands and communications managers ready for that, the IFRS. So essentially, we need to understand the life cycle of issues into a crisis. Again, it might seem academic, but once you understand the principle of it, you're able to apply it in delivery and in managing reputations. So we once we get that, an issue always starts out as a crisis, then we're putting our ears down. What is happening? What are the different conversations happening around our brand, around organizations like ours, in the industry, in our sectors, around even as an individual, as a brand? What are the conversations happening around me as it relates to my sector, as it relates to the work that we do, so that when it does become a crisis, we're well prepared and ready to go. So let's look at an example. Here is the alcohol in sachet ban, which happened last year, at least taking effect January. But this started in 2020. There was a story in September 2020. NAFDAC intends to take on this ban or implement this ban. And you can see how conversations started to come up around the effects on people, the effects on the consumer, the effect on the revenue of the organization, the effects on brands, and how analysts started to speak for manufacturers. Just a minute, please. How analysts started to speak for manufacturers. We can see the engagement, whether it was dialogue, and of course, I'm sure a lot of conversations happen in the background. Dialogue, whether it's defense, bargaining, all of that. But we're looking at what we have here through the media. But in effect, the ban still came into effect between November and January this year. This is an example of how an issue emerged, the engagements and conversations happened, and now a lot of brands have to deal with the aftermath of this. And you can see a picture, for example, of protests to say, well, this is going to be the impact on Nigerian businesses, going to be the impact on is going to be an impact on Nigerian businesses. NAFDAC, don't plunge Nigeria into chaos, and that's because of a policy that came up. In then preparing, how do we go about it? We need to establish a clear crisis preparedness framework. Every organization that has a crisis preparedness framework, please let me know that you can still hear me. Great. Every organization that has a clear crisis preparedness framework. Thank you. Every organization that has a clear crisis preparedness framework is able to deal with crisis when they arise. I think I've beaten the horse about this already, to say, well, crisis management and reputation management doesn't happen when the crisis emerges. It's right there before it comes in. And so to really manage a crisis, there needs to be strong monitoring. That feeds into the crisis preparedness framework. Crisis happens, it requires adaptability, agility, quick thinking, and it's not the time then to be developing crisis management. What's our crisis management strategy? Or what are our holding statements? What do we want to say right now? When should we say it? All of that work is done beforehand. All of that work, because a lot of thought goes into it. You're able to say, there's a fire in the building, a staff is caught, something happened, what are we going to say? Our product, if there's product counterfeiting, what are the issues? How are we going to say it? If it's all in the media, our brand is being counterfeited, how do we respond? When do we respond? Who says what? Who has the credibility within the organization to say? You create and map out scenarios, plan scenarios, and simulate possible happenings and occurrences. And so, excuse me, the crisis preparedness framework is absolutely the first place to dealing with the crisis, to crisis communications. If you do not have a crisis communications or preparedness framework, reach out to me. All I'm saying is the first level, every organization should have a crisis preparedness framework. It includes information about your CMT team. Of course, there's the business continuity plan that is always housed within the risk managers or head of risk department or function. But that should not just sit there. The communications professional has a responsibility to develop the statements and simulate already the possibilities so that when it does happen, everyone's on their feet. The statements are ready. There's no need to start thinking. And because crisis requires quick thinking, it's not the time to be developing a strategy. I've said a lot about that already. We need a crisis preparedness framework. We need a playbook. We need something that would guide us when a crisis eventually happens. What goes into it? Assessment of the risks and the issues. Who's the CMT team? CMT team includes the CEO, if you have a COO, the risk person, the communications, the head of communications, who has responsibility over what, who's saying what, to what audience, to whom, who's the spokesperson specifically on certain issues, because certain issues require certain credibilities in a sense for response. You won't be talking about something financial and you will be bringing the operations manager or you bring in supply chain. No, it's talking about something financial, a financial crisis. It's the CEO, it's the CFO that are possibly speaking. What are the response frameworks? What are the timelines for responses? What should be said? Who's the responding party? Who bylines or signs beneath the press statement, which is usually the CMO or the chief corporate communications officer? What are the scenarios? And we've talked about scenarios previously. What are the scenarios? Each issue would have different scenarios. So when the product is found to be defective, or we for example, send a product out into the market. Let's say, let's use the example of headphones. Particular headphones in a certain market, let's use, say, Kaduna. Particular headphones sent from a Lagos manufacturer to Kaduna are defective, but the same headphones have been sent to Onitsha, to somewhere in the southwest, Ogun State, Ibadan, but it's only the ones in Kaduna that have issues. You want to know who's responsible. Is it a factory? Is it a batch that was sent to Kaduna that is bad? Or is it the distributor that has an issue? Maybe they mishandled them, they put them in the heat for too long or something. different scenarios, what to say when the company is responsible, what to say when an external party is responsible, internal media handling policies. The media person reaches out to his staff. What should be said? What's the direction for staff when they're contacted by the media? How do they handle it? How do they log the inquiry and ensure that it is marked down? Because when a crisis is over, you're going to have to review how the crisis was handled. Holding statements, press releases clearly stated that only need to be tweaked and with just specific gaps that need to be filled, specifically around an issue. Oh, there's a fire. We have a holding statement for that. Product counterfeiting, we have a holding statement for that. Are we dissociating ourselves or accepting responsibility? Again, all of that is dependent on the scenario, on who's responsible and what has happened. Sometimes it's about saying, well, we're not completely responsible, but we cannot dissociate ourselves. So we have to accept some form of responsibility, or we at least have to show that we're taking steps to dealing with this. Templates and guides, incident logs, draft policies, etc. And then in responding, how do we deal with a crisis when it eventually happens? So we've prepared, and now all of a sudden it has happened. What should we do? First, we assess the situation. What's the scale? What's the magnitude? Is it in the media? Are people already talking about it? Who's talking about it? You can have something that seems to be big in the media, but then it's not necessarily the right people. And sometimes a response to that, the wrong response to that actually escalates it. So you need to assess the situation and then define what actually happened. What is the actual incident? What are the facts? Do we have anything in terms of numbers? A couple of factory workers are stuck in the factory. For example, how many of them? Who exactly is there? Do we have a factory manager there who possibly knows more about the factory and can, again, lead to an escape or release or something of that sort? What are the facts around the incident and around the issue, and who then should be responding? Then we decide what part of our crisis communication strategy needs to be executed. Who is responsible for logging? All of that is stated. What specific narrative are we putting out here? And I want to say this with all intentionality. The very work of crisis management and reputation management is built significantly on what we say. And that's why things like key messages are very important. For those of us that are communications experts, we know that we develop our key messages, but then we tailor those same key messages to scenarios and issues. So the narrative is very important. How are we framing the issue? Are we framing it as, well, we're the bosses here, we don't care, you guys go to Hades, for example? Or are we accepting responsibility? We've talked about that. Who's fielding media inquiries? Do we have a member of the comms team responsible for that? Or would we just do an electronic method for fielding? All of that is already stated in the communication strategy. Who's the spokesperson? And then, of course, with ongoing communications is consistent updates, proactive updates. Do we at some point need someone else to endorse our actions concerning this issue? Or do we keep quiet until we are ready? Sentiments. What are people saying as we respond? So every time we put out a statement, what is being said? Do we need to quickly tweak and change direction? All of that happens as we manage a crisis. I will want to give a specific example. So there's a time, I think at about 11 p.m. or something, I got a call from the vice chairman of one of the companies I had worked with. And he had said, well, there's this client. there's this specific issue in the news and somebody is writing something negative about them. And he immediately wanted us to draft a statement and share it out. And in hearing the issue, it didn't seem like, intuitively, of course, it didn't seem like it needed a response at the time. And that's a mistake a lot of time that we make a lot of the time, where we immediately want to send something else. Oh, we have this press release and we have these holding statements. We should immediately put it out. And so I gave my opinions and I said, I don't think that we should be responding. We shouldn't be saying anything at this time. He said, okay, I'll call you back. And then he went off. He called back and he said, have you drafted this statement? I really think that we should send it out. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think that we should be making a statement. The challenge is, once we do, we're going to escalate it. It now becomes, as they say I think in Yoruba, tagi, or back and forth. You say your own, you say my own, and then it becomes a public issue when it shouldn't necessarily be. And so he said he was going to think about it, and he left. He, of course, hung the call. And this was middle of the night. Of course, with crisis situations, you're always not, never, it's not like you're sitting down saying, okay, yeah, the crisis is coming up, or yeah, I'm just going to have my dinner, and once it comes, we'll respond. And a few minutes later, he calls back to say, I agree. I don't think that it is time to respond to it. Let's leave it. And I think it was a few months later, he referred to that and said, well, he really, really appreciated the honesty and feedback that I gave about not responding. And a lot of the time, communications experts, we need to sort of stand our ground, especially when we know the brands and we know the issues that are happening. We know the context and understand the context, because not every seeming crisis requires a response. And you can say, okay, well, yeah, it's like, sometimes it's like what's said, a colloquial saying, sometimes silence is the best answer. We need to know those, but we would only be able to think clearly in the moment if we have prepared for the situation, and then we're able to think calmly and respond as we ought. And then, of course, closure, which is assessing the impact, determining what happened, the failures, what are the lessons, and how do we go ahead to resolving. Recovery. In recovery, it should be about reputational recovery. Recovery is, of course, very tied to closure in crisis management timeline. We need to understand the crisis, make sense of what happened, what caused it, what are the triggers, what are the effects, how do we prevent a future occurrence. And again, it comes back to monitoring, being aware, knowing what's happening before a crisis happens, when there is a crisis, and even after. What were the underlying problems, whether it's operational, was it a financial decision taken wrongly? Was it an external factor that impacted on us? How do we make amends? Whether it's restitution and compensating victims. When it comes to the brand, how do we make amends with possibly consumers, with the community? How do we strengthen our approach to this? And the final bit is about increased transparency and accountability. Why is this important? When a crisis happens, trust is disrupted. Trust is sometimes a lot of the time almost dissolved, because a crisis says, well, you're not in charge of your operations, possibly. A crisis says you were not necessarily as prepared. And if a crisis is properly managed, of course, you're able to rebuild that trust. But the most important contributor to rebuilding trust is transparency and accountability, saying that these are the steps we have taken, these were the steps we took during the crisis, These are the steps we are taking post-crisis, and this is the impact. And we can give ourselves about, say, 6 months to a year of ensuring accountability, publishing the impact of our remedial efforts or remediation efforts, sorry, the impact of our remediation efforts, and how we're able to rebuild trust, how we're actively investing in making amends. And then finally, driving brand sustainability. Anyone operating in this environment, whether as a brand, an individual, or an organization, really needs to take the concept of sustainability seriously, because sustainability helps to prevent a lot of the issues and crises that would ordinarily emerge if the right environmental practices are established, whether with the manufacturing of the products or the consequential brands, whether it's the social capital we're building or investing in, or governance as it relates to processes, to leadership, to equity, to 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 operations. Once we have the right governance, we're most likely going to avoid the crisis that will emerge. Of course, we understand that there are external factors, but once these things are established, even when there's an external factor, there is preparedness to deal with the issues that that pop up. So embedding the right sustainability approaches within our businesses, and I think that communications professionals, marketing professionals should be advocates for this, because we are custodians of the brand and reputation of the organization. And so if an organization is not dealing properly, the truth is that it always comes back to us. We're the ones that have to deal with the aftermath of wrong decisions. We're the ones that are awake at night dealing with media, pulling down stories or not pulling down stories, drafting messages and all of that. Of course, I'm not saying that we're the only ones. I'm only saying we're the custodians of reputation. And because we are custodians of reputation, we are also custodians of corporate integrity. And I think so that sustainability allows us combine the elements of reputation management, crisis management, and collective good in building brand, in building our brands, individual, corporate, or product brands. And so I will encourage that we advocate sustainable approaches, and we're able to embed this in our operations and in our activities. Being proactive in our mindsets will shift crisis management from being reactive to more long-term risk prevention and resilience. And so with that, I will leave it here and say thank you for listening. I'm happy to take your question, and over to you, Samuel. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marty. This has been such an insightful session. So much to take away, so much to take away. And we'll be taking questions now. We'll be taking questions. So I would ask that we please so for the participants, you can drop your questions in the chat. And if you also want to speak up and maybe ask your questions directly, you can also please just raise your hands. You can drop your questions in the chat, or you can also raise your hand. So, like I said, so much to take away from this session. But I think for me, something very key that I'm taking away from this is that crisis management starts the moment a service or product is delivered, and not necessarily when issues come up. And that we have to be proactive in crisis management and not just reactive. So we'll be taking questions now. I'll be going through the chat, so please drop your questions in the chat. But let's start with Greater Maxine. Greater Maxine is raising his hands. He wants to ask a question. Greater Maximus, are you there? Okay, I think he dropped his hand already. So we have Winifred Obam. Winifred Obam.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the lecture. I think was really insightful. Sorry that my video is not on. I have a bad camera. However, my question is both a question and a comment. It seems that older organizations that have existed for over 15, 20 years, it seems they are very much more intentional about crisis management than recent organizations that are coming up. Because when most things that have been in the news recently, about let's say brand going through crisis, you see that there are new brands and they don't have, from how they approach it, it's almost like they don't have a plan. So it's very reactive. They're not proactive. So I'm wondering what is the reason why organizations then were more conscious of these aspects of their brand compared to organizations now.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Nancy, you can please answer the question.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. You are right in saying that more established organizations have a structure for crisis preparedness. And I think one of the factors that contributes to that is the phase and the evolution of the company. But is it impossible to prepare now as a startup or not? No, it isn't. Of course, founders, leaders are usually more consumed and driven by the business outcomes. What's the profit? What's the revenue? How's the brand doing? What are people saying about it? But that's why we're all here, right? And that's why we need to know whether in whatever organizations we're in with whoever it is we're speaking with, that crisis preparedness is important. And we might not necessarily have all of the playbook ready, which although I would recommend that we do, but it's about having the awareness, being able to identify the issues, knowing and being able to grasp the critical aspects of crisis management. But I will always say, let's have a crisis framework some way or the other that we can implement, and we can always push for it. That's why we're here. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for answering that question very well. So from the chat, we have Damilola Adejumo with a question. So Damilola is asking, how does one engage a client who still proves non-understanding even after exploring all crisis management processes, especially when they feel you are the problem and not them?
I'll need more clarity around that. How do you engage a client who feels that you're the problem?
Yeah. So Damilola, if you can please maybe raise your hand so that we can get you to unmute. Please do if you want to shed more light on that question. But before that, we also have Ubendu Ikechukwu raising his hand. He has a question. Damilola, I'm waiting for you. But before that, we have Ubendu Ikechukwu David with a question. Ubendu Ikechukwu, you can please go ahead with your question. Ubendu Ikechukwu.
Okay, I was waiting to be allowed to unmute. Good
Yeah,
afternoon,
fine.
everyone, and thank you very much for that insightful presentation. So my question is, with regards to the clients that you insisted not to respond, and in the case he agreed not to respond. What if he did not agree to respond and you are his client and he insists that you should respond and eventually it goes bad at the end of the day? What happens? How do you handle that? Is it that okay, you going to insist not to respond or you will respond no matter what comes out of it? So I needed to get that part. Because the case scenario you painted was he agreed that you should not respond. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. If the client had asked that we respond, well, we would have responded and had to deal with, of course, the effects of that. But thankfully, they didn't. The role that a communications advisor plays is sensitive. Well, you of course always have to deal with the bulk stops at the table of either the client or your leader or the leadership team that you work with in your organization. And so if they do take the decision, you move on with it. What are then the next steps following the outcomes of that response? Hopefully it wouldn't have been negative, and if it had, then we would take the steps to resolving that, and ensuring that the organization is not as negatively impacted as it would have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oshikoya Temitope, can please unmute and ask your questions. Oshikoya Temitope.
Hello, I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you.
All right. Still, my question also relates to your last answer. You said not every seeming crisis requires a response. So, for an organization who encounters a crisis, at what point should they respond?
As simple as that question is, it's complex, because it depends on the context and the situation. It depends on the crisis. Response sometimes is the strategy. I mean, response is the strategy. Silence sometimes is the strategy. It really depends, and that's why it requires agility and trusting your intuition and experience. Sometimes you would already have a response framework for a certain issue, but within the context of its happening, within the
Sorry,
Please
context
mute
of
me.
the occurrence.
please, can we get, if you're not speaking, please, can you mute your mic so that we can hear Miss Ronti clearly? Thank you.
Thank you. Within the context of its occurrence, a response would not necessarily be the right approach. A lot of the time, we always advocate monitoring and understanding. So you, for example, could have what seems to be a crisis. An influencer posts something about your brand, and your immediate approach would possibly, oh, let's just say we're not involved. But then you look at the type of influencer, they're not okay in their head. A response on that would be a problem, because then what you create is a way to trivialize and devalue the brand by responding to the influencer. Other times, you find that it's somebody more credible that has possibly written a piece. Your response might not be direct. Your response might be through someone else who has more credibility over that person to address the situation. So it depends on the context. It depends on the situation. It's not a linear or direct answer. I think what's important is the agility and the trusting of your intuition, and of course the crisis management team. Decisions will not be taken in isolation. You would always have advisors working, or well, we should have advisors working with different people to determine what's best. Now I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ranti. So, Damilola Adejumo, you can unmute now and clarify your earlier question. Damilola, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Ronsi, for the insightful
Damilola, are you there? Hello, Damilola.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we lost you for a
Can you
bit,
hear
but
me?
yes, we lost you for a bit, but we can hear you
Oh,
now. Please go ahead.
sorry about that. All right. Okay, so what I meant by what do we do when we have difficult clients? For example, you've probably you're rendering a service and then you advise the client doesn't really take your advice. You'd explore engaging, you explore communicating, you brought in a third party who could, explain better to the person and all of that. And still they don't take all of your advice.
I think we're having some issues from your end, Damilola. Can you hear me, Damilola?
Hello?
Because
Yes,
yes, so you're breaking off a bit. You're breaking off a bit. Miss Ronson,
oh, God.
did you get her question eventually, or I will
All
move
right,
on to
let
other question?
me just write it. So can
Sorry,
Well, I think
Damilola,
I got the
would you?
gist of it.
Okay.
I think I got the gist of it. You're advising a client that's not willing to take your advice. Um, it's Well, one thing is to continue to support them and hope that they see the light of day at some point. The other is to say, well, maybe I'm not of service to you, and there is another way that I can help you. I think a lot of the time we need to identify the actual problem and not necessarily just the one issue. So there might be something underlying that actually needs to be resolved, or we need to take a different approach to advising them. When it comes to engagement, I think it's really about relationships, and so we need to again understand, as we've said with stakeholders, what exactly is making them tick. Maybe we're not giving the advice the right way; they're not necessarily hearing what we're saying, and we need to say it in a different way, take a different approach, or focus on a more substantial problem that they're having, a more underlying problem that they're having, and not listening. That's what I would say. There's temptation to say, okay, well, just leave the client and go. Well, except the relationship is not negatively harming you. I think as with stakeholder engagement, there's always some way to get what you want.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Shanti. Adebayo Sidikot. Adebayo Sidikot. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You can please unmute and ask your questions. Adebayo Sidikot.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon. We can hear you, Adebayo.
Good afternoon, sirs. Good afternoon, ma'am. So this is very insightful. Like I really like the let's say program. Okay. So what I actually want to ask is there was a crisis in my organization. Somebody in the group, we manage an estate. We are not the facility managers, we are the estate surveyors and valuers. So somebody in the group was requesting for a house. They gave her a quick notice in the particular apartment she was staying in the same estate. So, she knows we are privy to some information in the estate. She approached me particularly and was asking if there's a vacant apartment. And I said yes. And so in the process, she was asking, the reason why they are giving her a quick notice in her present accommodation is because she has issues with her landlord. They are not very understanding. I was asking who owns the present flat she'll be moving to. So I had to give her the information, this is the person that owns the flat, and just to open up and let her know, okay, this particular flat doesn't have the issues, because we know the person that owns that flat is actually a lawyer, and people have the belief, lawyers have wahala and all that. So that information was just very brief, not a chit chat. It was very professional. So there was something recently that happened in the group in that estate, which we are in. And the next thing, she mentioned my name and said, oh, this person, okay, I think there was a facility. I don't know. I just want to briefly give an insight so you understand. So somebody in the estate was saying, okay, they are declaring 38 flats as against maybe 42 flats. And we know there are actually 39 flats that are occupied. So if 39 flats are occupied, that shows the money that we're supposed to pay, because there was a money issue. We're supposed to pay, it meant to be divided between 39 flats, not 38. Because I said, she quoted me on the group. I said, this flat, it belongs to so person, which was a very popular person in the estate. And that flat was not yet bought as at then. And this person is moving to another flat. So that means this estate is meant to be 39, not 38. Whereas what was discussed was not on that basis. So when we saw that, it's like, because number one, I actually own I own the business. So it looked to me like, oh, everybody will start looking at, like, see this person that we gave a property to. This is an information we wouldn't want you to, open up. And I just had to move up to my group, like, what can I say? I was very devastated. I was really shaking. Because everybody will look at it like, oh, this person cannot keep an information. Whereas it wasn't said. So after everybody had said it, they said I wrote an epistle to be posted on that group. And everybody said, oh, we shouldn't write that epistle. We should just go straight to the point and say, what we had was not a chit chat. We just wrote a very short, it wasn't a chit chat, it was a professional, this thing. And you cannot quote me because I'm just a party manager. I'm not a facility manager. And that was dropped into group. After that, the person came and wrote another one. It looked like it was planned. But that the sentences we dropped was very brief. And people came asking us like, oh, that was very professional. But believe me, I wrote an epistle. I wrote actually I used ChatGPT voice to write a lot to just explain how the entire thing happened. So that other person will not feel, oh, this is why are you discussing me to another person? Like, you understand, integrity. Like, we actually confided in you, whereas they didn't even end up buying the property. They wanted to buy. We didn't even go through all that. It was just a very brief talk. And you went to the group. I don't know what happened, why she wanted to be famous, but we wrote something very simple. But in my mind, till tomorrow, I'm still feeling I was going to write the epistle for people that is in that group that will feel, oh, maybe, some people overthink. But in my mind, two other people had contacted us and said, oh, we actually wrote fantastic. So I was just feeling, I was not supposed to drop the epistle to actually say how it really happened, or what we said was supposed to just be the best. I'm still feeling tomorrow I was supposed to write it, how it actually happened and all that. But I believe the two people that are giving us the heads up, I don't know, that's just the scenario. So this crisis class actually really brought because it was very recent. It was just like 2 months ago. But that was just so please, I don't.
So I think when you're thinking about anything, especially documented, always think about the future. Anything that you say, and you give an example of speaking to somebody not even documented, just in person, and you had this impact or this issue. So imagine that you are saying something and the impact on your organization in the future could be A or B. So everything documented is always a point of reference. Legally, of course, communications wise, as with communications, sometimes you have to think like a lawyer. You have to think and say, what are the implications of this in the future, in the now and in the future? While, yes, it seems like you're trying to pacify emotions and all of that. Sometimes, a lot of time, the little thing you say is the most effective. Less is more than trying to explain and potentially give more of an issue for yourself and your organization in future. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ranti. So Oluwaseyi Tomosori on the chat is asking a question. So just to mention, this is probably going to be the last question we'll be taking for this session. So we have quite a number of hands still raised and a number of questions on the chat box, but for time's sake, this is probably the last question we'll be taking for this session, unless we want to take maybe one or two more. So Oluwaseyi Tomosori on the chat says, using Money Point as a case study, what could have been done differently following the CEO's speech at the platform, especially after the backlash and threats of canceling the company? Nigeria still remains the company's biggest market, but the CEO refused to back down despite the backlash. In this case, what is the ideal resolution here? And how does one balance two strong brands, an individual brand with strong opinions and a potential to affect the perception of another strong brand, the company in this case?
That's a very interesting question. Hi, Shei. But it's great that you would bring that up. Considered it while preparing this. The first thing is going back to before he said it. As you know, with the work that we do, whatever platform, and I don't mind the pun, it's not intended, but whatever platform that an organization's leader stands on is the organization speaking. And so we have to always work with our leaders, our CEOs, to say the right things. What would have happened possibly, and I want to believe that they already had that, is media training to ensure that the CEO understands what he's saying, especially when it comes to the company. It's one thing to share your personal stories. It's another to then reference the organization and the organization's decisions. While they're two different things, in entities, they're one and the same because the organization, the founder, and all of that. So beforehand is the media training. It's that saying, well, don't speak about this or speak about this. And when you talk about things like this is how we say it. And I think I referenced that with respect to narratives and framing and messaging. The second bit of before that statement is we have noticed this is a problem. Is there anything we can do to contribute to the solution of this problem? And remember, in the beginning, I talked about reputational capital. So if there was already work going on, and I want to believe that there is, if there was already work going on, investing in the youth of Nigeria, doing all of that as some other companies started out doing, then that statement would have a cushion for its impact, because then it would be, okay, yes, he has said this, there is backlash, and there's no, we're already doing this, we're investing, we're only saying that this is a problem that needs to be solved, but we already have the facts and figures for our investment. We're putting in billions of naira or dollars into equipping the Nigerian youth for this. So that's before. And of course, that feeds into after. He has said it, there is backlash. I think that it should possibly have just been left as it was. Again, it's that whole, you say your own, you say my own, but a lot of the work would have happened before, so that when such statements are made, there is always a cushion. Sometimes, because you can't necessarily tell your CEO to shut up or keep quiet. He says things to buttress certain elements, and that's why the proactive investment in building reputational capital is important. And could they have possibly put out a statement? But the only statement I see working after such a remark would be facts and figures. We are already doing this. This is the action we are taking already. While we're not there yet, we're optimistic about the future of Nigeria, and we're constantly committed to investing in its youth, and we're able to do that. We're here for the long haul. That we're not getting talent in Nigeria doesn't mean that we're going to leave Nigeria. We're here for the long haul. We're going to put in the time, the efforts, the investment to ensuring that the Nigerian youth is built up. And that would be my perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah, such a beautiful answer to the question. So we can still take more questions. I just got informed by the team that we can take more questions. So Ahmad, you've had your hand raised for a while. Ahmad, are you there? Ahmad, please unmute and ask your question.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Nice to have you, Ahmad.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Udubi and Ms. Olani. Yeah, how would I start this? Okay, let me go directly by asking this question. How do you recognize a bait in the space of crisis management? Some allegations come as a bait. They expect you to say something. And when you don't say something, there is still evidences against you. How do you recognize a bait? How do you manage it? I'll pick a study from Ezra Olubi, okay, the Pistol guy. For instance, let's imagine that there were no tweets, okay, or people did not actually pinpoint to those tweets that he actually tweeted years back, all right, and somebody just came and said he did this, then, okay. You as an organization, how do you address this? Hope my question is clear.
How do you recognize a bait? Although I'm not seeing the bait in the Ezra Olubi scenario.
Okay, I said for instance, imagine that no one pointed to the tweets. There were tweets, all right, but people are not pointing. For instance, I come up and accuse him of doing ABC way back, but I did not present the evidence. Okay, I'm expecting whether Pista could respond or not. Where they go silent, okay, I can push out these evidences, but where they come out to address it or find other ways. So my question is, how do you recognize it so that you won't fall into a deep water, okay, that will be beyond you? This is my question. Hope it's clear now.
It is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A bait is an issue. A bait is most likely an issue. And I think I will always take any baits as an issue. I'll always first start there. It's an issue. An issue has been raised. As a company, we don't necessarily have to respond, but it has been raised. The first step is to investigate. Is there some fact to this? Is there some, like you said, reference in the past to it? That's where to start from. I don't think you should treat anything as a bait. Start with it as an issue, as something that has been raised, and investigate it. Find out the facts, the possibilities. It might not even necessarily be that there is evidence in documentation, as you see on Twitter. It might be that something has happened in the past and there is somebody whose word can be taken as witness. So always start with an issue. It's an issue that needs to be investigated. We need to address it. We need to find out the facts. And once an issue is raised, it says it is time for us to reflect that as a scenario in our crisis preparedness. So if this is raised, we're looking for already and stating how we're going to respond to it. We don't have to wait for it to now become a crisis. We should already have a way to do it. And I'll give an example. So there was some organization that was possibly going to recruit somebody who had some issues in the past. And before the recruitment happened, the task was already to say, well, there has been this allegation in the past. The person was acquitted by both court and otherwise, but we still need to have a response strategy for that. And that had to be developed. The approach to responding had to be clearly stated. So nothing is a bait until it is possibly dissolved. But I don't think everything is always an issue, and we always have to be on our toes to responding.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Swansea. So we have a question from the chat, Sarah Priscilla Joseph. So she's saying, thank you for the lecture. Is there anything for brand influencers, especially corporate brand, on how to manage communications during crisis. So she's asking if there's any training for brand influencers, maybe something you do, maybe for brand influencers, basically for communication management during crisis.
So what we do media training, and as part of that training is of course how to respond to certain issues, and dealing with I won't say crisis, but within that is the principles of crisis management. Because media training is not just about speaking, it's also about what you say, whether digitally, socially, or not. And so we do have trainings and offerings in that, if that's what you're asking. And I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so we had some hands up, and all of a sudden I can't see anybody. That's fine. So Damilola is also asking. Okay, I think I've seen. I can see Adim. I can see Peter. Damilola is also asking. So she's asking, at what point do you disengage a contract when you feel your brand reputation is at risk when a client isn't listening? So I'm thinking that's like a follow-up question to our earlier question.
Well, as soon as you believe your reputation is at stake, again, it depends on what you say reputation is, because you can disengage from a contract, and the perception is that you didn't deliver all that you should have in that contract. So you need to, again, it comes back to understanding the sentiments and the underlying issues. So what exactly is being said. But if it is clear and there's clear documentation that says, I have addressed all the issues, I have provided all the advisory and recommendations, and you're not dealing with it, and it's starting to become a reputational issue, yes, with all sense of esteem and pride, you can disconnect. But I would not take that first step. I would want to understand really what the underlying issues, like what exactly is the problem. And I think there are other ways to get that information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ranti. So I would just really like, if you have I would like to ask you to maybe share final thoughts with us and maybe some words of encouragement before I hand over to Mr. Nnamdi for some information that he has for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Samuel, for being a great moderator and for facilitating this conversation. It for me is preparedness is the way. Crisis management and reputation management starts from the get-go. And of course, sustainability, the concept of long-term sustainability is a strong approach to managing reputation, especially now. Sustainability is becoming a very significant issue, important issue in public discourse. And so no one should be ignoring it. While there is a bit around reputation management, as we've said with issues management, if this is an issue that is becoming more prominent, then we need to be addressing it. But yes, long-term crisis management starts from the beginning, ensuring that all aspects of the business, of the brand are actually dealt with. And of course, let's adopt sustainable approaches. And if we don't have the information about it, we can always find out. Also to communications and marketing, especially corporate communications professionals. We are the corporate integrity holders. We own the reputation of the organization or the brands that we're working with. And so we have to ensure that all aspects of the brand, of the value chain are seen to, and we will do very well. I think that's it. But I do really appreciate the Rome Business School for taking the time, for inviting me to this. It was great sharing. I love the questions. And if you do want to reach out, please feel free. If there are other questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Francis. Please, guys, can we give a virtual clap to our facilitator for this session?
Sure.
Thank you for this session. So, Mr. Nandi, you can go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you so much. I must say, our facilitator for today, and that's Madam Oluwarotimi Laniyon. It was really very, very insightful. I've really learned a whole lot from you today, most especially when you quoted this crisis management and communication start the moment a service or product is offered before a crisis ever emerges, and which is true. And that's why, as business leaders, as professionals, we need to see reason why this department, we must have this department even in our organization, no matter how small the organization may look. And also as well too, I want to appreciate you, our esteemed moderator and Samuel Luby. It was really indeed wonderful having you moderate this webinar. So I want to say thank you so much for everyone who actively joined this webinar section. Rome Business School, our mission is to train entrepreneurs, managers, and professionals to a level of excellence in their work, competency, and ethical approach to business and work. So we are here to, what we do here is just to see how we could train business leaders to make them better managers for a better world, and which we see this coming out of you. So for those who actually have enrolled and for those who are yet to enroll for master's program, the October intake is ongoing. And I would like you to take this step in the, because you're actually taking the right step in the right direction by firstly joining this insightful webinar. And I would like to encourage you to take up the advantage of coming on board for this October intake, which had already started. I would like you, after this webinar, if you're yet to enroll, reach out to your advisor so they could just guide you through and walk you through the admission process, so you could keep enjoying some of these webinars before the master's program starts fully by October 2026. And as well too, there is a scholarship ongoing, which we call the Early Bird Scholarship, which you can as well take advantage of this before 25th of May. So I would like you to reach out to your advisor so they could guide you through, and let's continue what we have just started. So thank you so much for everyone who has joined, and also want to appreciate the Career Service for coming up with this interesting topic, crisis communication and brand reputation management. Esther, I want to say thank you so much for as well being there for us, the Career Service Department, and also the head of department. I want to say thank you to everyone that made this section a great success. Thank you so much. I hand over to you, to the Career Service to continue from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nandi. I would like to, at this juncture, just hand over to Mr. John for closing remarks. Mr. John, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. As we bring this section of the BLDP workshop to a close, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speaker, Oluwarotimi, sharing a valuable.
Sorry, Mr. John, you're muted.
Mr. John, sorry, you're muted. Let's take the group photos before we wrap up. Please, we'd like everyone on this call to turn on their camera so that we can take a group photo. Thank you very much. Kindly turn on your camera, please.
Kindly turn on your camera so we can take a screenshot, a group screenshot together.
Just keep the camera on, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Wait, but the fish be this. That's fine. But the fish be this.
Just give us a few minutes. All right, Mr. John, you can go ahead.
Okay. As we bring this section of the BLDP workshop to a close, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speaker, Oluwarotimi,
for sharing this valuable insight and expertise with us today on communication and brand reputation management. I would also like to thank our very own moderator, Samuel. That was a top-notch moderation for guiding the discussion and ensuring an engaging and impactful section. To all our participants, thank you for your active involvement, thoughtful contribution, and commitment throughout this workshop. Your engagements really made this section worthwhile. I encourage you all to apply the knowledge you have gained and continue driving excellence in your respective role. Thank you all once again, and we wish you continued success. Kindly do well to complete the attendance survey via the link. An attendance survey has been sent to the link. Do well to fill it correctly so you can get the access to the workshop recording and slide. Thank you very much. At this junction, we call it an end. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you all.